So it's very nice to meet you all. The drive up here was a drive up here. It was very, very flat. It's my second time in Saskatchewan. The first time I was up here, I was a roadie, and we drove through it in a Winnebago, and we didn't stop. And I was like, "Are we in purgatory? This is crazy." We drove straight through to Winnipeg. But I'm Landon Barrowman. I'm a 488 pipe fitter who's been in the trade for over 15 years. I worked at Suncor Base Plant as a sprinkler fitter who inspected all of their fire equipment, fire equipment, their fire equipment systems, and ensured that they were all working, right? I installed pumps for them and for their underground and ensured that all their valves are working in pretty much every single place in this crazy gas plant. It was 2023 when I had almost everything hit me at once. While working 12-hour shifts, 2 weeks in, 2 weeks out, I suffered from a separation with my what was soon to be fiance that turned into a lengthy custody battle and a property dispute. While going through that and calling lawyers every day and trying to figure out what was happening with my life, I got diagnosed with colon cancer. And then while dealing with that diagnosis, my father passed away from respiratory failure while I was up north. And then at the end of it, I got laid off. So while going through all this, I was, the first initial things that kind of happened, and I found a book by a woman named Gail Sheely called Male Passages. And in this, it kind of explains some of the things that men go through when they're reaching our age and their midlife and stuff like that. And it explained 4 things that are responsible for putting men into what is called a midlife crisis. You know, when you go and buy the Lamborghini or your favorite childhood car that you had and you try to relive your youth, or date the 19-year-old girl, this is what puts men into these weird frameworks of mind where they're trying to do this stuff. And it's either a health scare, death of a loved one, like death of someone in their family, a separation from their partner, or loss of employment. So I was just ticking them off. I was like, oh, great. All 4 within like a 6-month period. That fucking sucks. Like, I'm pretty much ready for this midlife crisis to happen. But she explained that 2 things could happen. You could either go into crisis and have all these kind of things really affect your life in a negative way, or you can come out of it kind of transformed, knowing how to deal with them with a new passion for life. And I like to think that what happened to me was the second one, because I was able to find a bunch of mental health tools that ended up helping me, that I was able to use on the job site every single day while I was, in my camp room every single night, and just help me keep it together and kind of aim forward with my goals and how to get through all that fucking shit that life just like dumped on my doorstep, And it was a lot of the disillusionment that I had from going to therapy that kind of made me go into this direction. So after using these cognitive behavior therapy skills while on the job site, I started kind of looking around and seeing other guys who were going through similar stuff, right? And I thought, fuck, man, they could probably use this stuff too, right? For instance, one of my buddies that I worked with every single day, he was the guy I'd drive around in a truck with when we were inspecting all these systems. One day we drive up to this beautiful tailings pond up here, watching the sunset after our work is done, and he gets a phone call, and his mother, who had been having a 10-year-long struggle with cancer, had finally passed away. And this is one of those salt-of-the-earth dudes, like he's a farm boy in Alberta who's just built like a brick shit house. I've seen wrenches slip in his hand when he's pulling and like knock him in the face and he just spits the blood out. I've literally seen a compressed canister blow up in his face, and it was so loud, the safety guy literally fainted. And this guy comes back up and I'm thinking it's just gonna be a bloody stump, and his head's still there, everything's there. One day he was driving home from work, and he's like, oh yeah, I hit a moose, totaled my car, picture of his car in the ditch. It's just mangled. Like, how could a man crawl out of that? Then he sends a selfie of him in the emergency room with stitches all up and down his arm, and he's smiling. So this guy's a tough as nails dude. When he got that call, tears just started falling from his eyes, and he just looked at them like, I don't know what this is. What is happening to me? Like, he was scared of his emotion, right? So I told him, like, Dale, we're heading back to the lunchroom, right? You're going to have to head home and all this other stuff. And he's like, well, what's there for me at home? What am I going to have there, right? My mother's already dead. There's nothing for me to go back to. I mean, I don't want to be sad and poor. Why would I go back home? And it really rang a bell in my head going, this is how a lot of people feel who work in the trades. They're away from their families for such long hours, and they've kind of become isolated in their work, that they feel the only contribution that they have to their family is a financial one, that they contribute financially, but they're not involved in the whole family system. Here was a man who didn't understand at the time, that his daughter needed him because she just lost a grandmother, that his father needed him because he just lost a spouse, and his brothers and sisters had also lost a mother, and they needed that network of people to kind of rely on to go through their grief and their emotions and kind of just understand how they were feeling by reflecting on each other, right? The second part that kind of ringed a bell in my head is when we drove him back to the lunchroom, despite all his efforts to say, I'm staying, I'm finishing this shift, we still got a week and a half left, there's no way I'm going home, the company refused to let him work. They said, you're going to be a safety hazard to yourself, you're going to be a safety hazard to those around you, and you're not going to get anything done. So right there, you have a company admitting that the mental health of somebody is going to affect the safety on site, and it's going to affect the productivity. And what I found interesting in comparison later was, I was going through a divorce, I was going through colon cancer, my father had just passed away when I was on shift, and I drove back home, but nothing had really changed for me coming back after that. But there was no acknowledgement of any of that in any way. I was getting write-ups for coming into work drunk, right? Because I just wasn't handling it correctly. And this was an acknowledgement that mental health was a huge safety hazard in that kind of condition. Another fellow that I really thought could use some of the stuff that I was teaching was a man from Saskatchewan here, right in Saskatoon, who worked with us in that base plant. And he was like the proverbial hothead dude, right? He was the guy that you wanted on your side because he would tell the operators where to stick it. He'd be like, oh, you're not giving me our permit, you need this. And he'd eventually get your permit for you. Or if somebody gave you a crappy procedure, like a foreman gave you a crappy procedure, he'd be the person yelling at them, telling them that it's absolutely fucked and nobody's going to do this. And, you wanted him on your side. But one day, all that hot-headedness really caught up with him. He was dealing with a lot of shit with his kids here at home. And, he had cameras up in his house that he'd see what they were up to all the time. So he'd be looking at his phone, just freaking out. And then, dealt with the stress at work. One day we were tasked with doing a hydro test outside of a fab shop on a piece of spool pipe that was going to go into the ground. And it was mid-November, so we were filling it with glycol outside of a fab shop, and he just starts freaking out. He goes, this makes us look so fucking stupid. We're out here doing a hydro test in November. I don't care if it's glycol. Why couldn't they get us some space in this fab shop? Everybody who drives by is going to look at us, and they're going to think we're so fucking dumb. And he goes, oh! And he goes into the truck, and he goes and grabs a little, plastic inhaler, and he starts hitting this inhaler. I'm like, what are you doing? He goes, I just need a shot of my nitro. My heart's acting up. And I'm like, what the fuck is nitro? What are you doing? He's, oh, it's just my angina. Every once in a while, it just gets a little bit bad, and I got to do that. And I'm like, okay, let's try to settle down. And he's like, well, it's not really going down. Maybe you drive me to the, on-site services here for a second. So I drive him to the fire hall. They immediately load him into an ambulance and put him into Fort McMurray Hospital, right? So looking back at it, knowing the things I know now about mental health and how the body reacts to thoughts and things like that, his body was having a reaction to some of the thoughts and some of the things that he was telling himself, like, people are going to laugh at me and people are going to laugh at us and they're not going to take us seriously. And he got so worked up that his body had a literal reaction to it. His blood started going higher, and he almost gave himself, he did give himself a minor heart attack by literally just stressing about shit. Knowing what I know now about the tools, I could have used some of the things I know now to calm him down. So there's breathing techniques that you can use to kind of bring yourself down from those high elevated levels, right? So he ended up leaving, and he didn't come back to work, not because he died or anything, but just because, again, he became a hazard to the company and to other people on site. If he can't take care of himself like that and he can't take care of his mental health, the company deemed him, unfit for work, which I don't agree with, but, it's just the kind of the way the cookie crumbles there. So that being said, at the time I was learning about all this stuff because I decided to get an exit strategy when I found out that we were going to get laid off in the end of 6 months. So I started going to school for psychology, and I found just a love for it. And I'm still in school for psychology. I'm going to be finishing my degree here in a year. But I fell in love with research for psychology, and I decided to start searching. I'm like, did anybody ever do a study on people in the oil sands on mental health? I wonder if that's ever been done. And it turns out it has been done. There was a woman who, is a sociologist of the University of Alberta, and her name's Sarah Doro, and she did an entire study on fly-in and fly-out workers and the mental health conditions that they've gone through, and she found out some interesting things. How do I?
The right arrow.
Right arrow. Cool. One of the crazy things is that 1 in 7 people that she talked to reported having thoughts of suicide within the last year. And I looked at that stat and I thought, Sarah Doro, and she's a sociologist, and she came into the oil sands and talked to a bunch of oil sands guys about suicide. And I'm like, knowing what I know and how comfortable I felt around psychologists or people with like degrees and shit like that, I'm like, how many of these guys actually just opened up and told her? And how many guys were like, yeah, whatever, placated her and just kind of pushed her through it? So I'm like, 1 in 7 was brave enough to admit that shit. Like, I know in my heart this number to be much higher, which 1 in 7 still warrants a crisis in a small population. If 1 in 7 people in a population of people are thinking about committing suicide, that's like alarms should be ringing off. If it was nurses, if it was, any other population, there'd be a lot of like fuss about it. But it seems like with a lot of construction, it just kind of washed over. There was other interesting facts in that report. One of them is that 82% of people working in the oil sands will show up to work sick, right? So if you're willing to show up when you feel physically ill, how often are you showing up when you're not completely mentally there, right? Another one was that over 60% of them had access to mental health, different mental health utilities, and would never use them. They said, I would never use it, right? There's no way I'm going to go through my work to go to get mental health stuff. And I thought, well, why is that? And I was doing something the other day that really opened up my eyes to why that is. I was actually doing an event for a nonprofit that raises money for mental health, and I'd hired one of my friends to be a bartender. And when she showed up, she was like, what the fuck? Why'd you hire me to be a bartender? I'm literally like a event planner for the city. I could have helped you with all of this. I could have got you sponsors. I could have got you this. We could have made this thing so much bigger. And I remember turning to her and I'm like, Emily, your father just like passed away from dementia. I didn't want to like put so much shit on your plate. And I realized that even like with the best of intentions for a good friend of mine, I'd still like completely overpassed her for an opportunity. And this is a problem that guys have, and anybody has with mental health and bringing it to their bosses, is they don't want to be treated different in any kind of way. They don't want to report their mental state to anybody and check in like that because they're fearful of, being discriminated against in any kind of way, right? And even after you say it, you think, fuck, man, are people treating me different? And you become in this like kind of guessing game. So this is one of the big blockades. The other one is, a lot of guys don't want to go to a therapist. They don't want to go and sit in front of a therapist, somebody that they don't know with a degree, who they feel is trying to tell them how to live their lives. There's some interesting stats that I've heard when I was, when I'm going to school here. And one is that most people don't go to a psychologist or any kind of therapist or get help until they're pretty much at the end of how much they can take. They go, you know what, I'm going to call in a professional now because I'm about ready to do something that is not going to be good. That's like a crisis point, right? And then the other crazy part of this stat is the average person will visit a psychologist twice, meaning that like this person who's at the end of their rope will go to a psychologist twice and then stop. If that was like this store, if your average customer came here twice, you'd be like, what the fuck are we doing wrong? Like, does the store stink? Is there like dead rats around here? Like, why are people not coming back here, right? It'd be a business model you can fix, but psychology seems to be okay with it. They seem to believe, oh, well, people just have to kind of shop around and find the right psychologist. Well, for guys who are running on benefits, and some of us live in check to check, we're not wanting to spend, the thousands of dollars it takes to find the right fit, right? It's a one and done. Did this work? It didn't work. Well, I'm not going to fucking try that again, because that's how my mind worked, right? So I've kind of been vacuumed into this space from learning these tools and starting to teach them to a lot of construction workers, literally in my basement. And the reason why I found in school is because they call it culturally competent counseling. There's not many construction workers out there who go into the world of psychology and give a fuck about mental health, right? So me being one, I've been kind of forced into this space of, and willingly, it's not so forced, but, of becoming a mental health advocate and talking about this stuff. And the reason why I think a lot of the tools work so well is because you don't have to go talk to a psychologist about the shit. You don't have to report it to anybody. You can work on this stuff yourself, right? And that's what I teach. This kind of bridges a lot of gaps. I just did a huge talk in Fort McMurray for a symposium for the Canadian Mental Health Association called Beneath the Hard Hat. And the big talks that a lot of these guys were doing, none of them were teaching tools, none of them were teaching anything, but they were talking about awareness. And one of the things they wanted to raise awareness of is something called peer perspective counseling, which means when you get mental health help from someone on the same level as you, right? So someone who's just a coworker or someone who's another tradesperson. I'm like, this stuff works. And I'm like, well, why aren't you doing it? Why aren't we teaching it? Why are we still talking about what works, what doesn't work, instead of just fucking doing the work, right? This is my biggest peeve as a construction workers, when guys who would just sit around and talk about how to do the job, and I'd be like, let's go, let's do the job. We don't need to talk about it more. We talk about it to death, right? So culturally competent counseling really helps because I'm a dude who's, put steel toe boots on and has woken up at 5 a.m. every morning and drank mud water coffee out in trailers and, been isolated from my family and went through all this crap in like a, compressed kind of thing and come out the other end of it, with my head on and, with a better attitude. In fact, I kind of look back at all that shit with like my ex-wife and, going through the custody battle and my father's death and, even colon cancer. And I think I'm glad all that shit happened because it transformed me into being able to manage shit. Now when something crazy happens in my life, I go, well, fuck, I got through that. I can get through all this shit too, right? And I have the tools to help me with it. And I use them often, daily, right? So, I've talked a lot about cognitive behavior therapy and the tools that I'm using, and they're based in cognitive behavior therapy, but I haven't really told you what it is yet. So I'm a person, I don't gatekeep any tools. I remember when I first started learning about this, it was because I had asked the psychologist. I had told her, I'm up at north and I'm worried that my wife is going to divorce me. I'm literally like staring at the ceiling being like, what is my life going to be like now? I don't know what's going to happen, right? What can you give me that'll help me calm down, that'll get me to work safe? I go work a 12-hour shift in a poisonous gas plant where you make a wrong turn and H2S literally comes out of sewer pipes and could take you down, right? How do I stay alert in that site if I'm up all night thinking about what my future is going to be like because I'm uncertain, right? She's like, well, I can give you some drugs. And I said, well, I don't want that. I don't want something that's going to grog me up or do any of that shit. I need something that will help, right? And she didn't have anything for me, but eventually I found cognitive behavior therapy, and I said, this is what I was looking for all along, something I could do anywhere. So I found it really odd that, a lot of psychologists will have to drag you along very long time before they start teaching you stuff like this. And when I found it, I was like, this is amazing. So cognitive behavior therapy works on the principle that all three of these things are connected and they affect each other, right? Your thoughts affect your behaviors affect your emotions affect your thoughts, and the other way around, same thing, right? And this can best be seen in an example I like to use. Say you're going golfing with a bunch of guys, right? And it's your first time golfing. You don't really golf. And you're like, okay, cool, I'll do 18 holes. Super brave. If you've never golfed before, you're going to go do 18 holes, okay. And you go and think, okay, I'm going to go and maybe I'll be really good at golf. Maybe this will be my new calling. I'm going to be the next Tiger Woods. It's going to be great. And the first thing you do is like miss the ball in front of a bunch of guys and you hear like a snicker behind you and your thoughts go, I fucking suck at this. I'm not going to be good at this. This is awful. What did I just do? This is going to be an awful day. And the behavior becomes you're dragging your ass all day through 18 holes going, oh God, what did I get myself into? This is awful. You start pounding beers or whatever the heck to kind of like make it all go away. And the emotion at the end of it all is I'm a failure. You feel insecure about yourself. You feel embarrassed that you put yourself through that. And then you never go and golf again. It's not for you, right? But that's how we can see these things all affect each other. But if we change that thought into, a reasonable thought and we have reasonable expectations of ourselves, this is my first time doing this. And there's going to be a learning curve. If I ever want to get good at this, or if I'm going to get good at anything, I have to realize there's a learning period. This is a skill that people develop. So when that swing and a miss happens, it becomes, yeah, of course that happened. I've never done this before. And then, instead, you're training yourself and having fun. So the behavior is you start giving it 100% of what you can and trying to hone that skill all through those 18 holes with a gentle mind on yourself, thinking, yeah, I'm going to miss a lot of shots and I'm going to suck at this. It's my first time. I'm getting used to this. But the emotion goes, it was okay. I actually stuck with it, and I'm feeling confident about myself, and at least I gave it a good shot, and I can do anything. And maybe you end up liking golf, so then you try it again and you learn a new skill that connects you with the friends you went with golfing. That's just an example to show how these things can be all connected. So the issue is when we have a problem in one of these areas, either our thoughts, which can be automatic thoughts that kind of happen as a reaction to things, right? You miss that ball and you think, I'm a fucking failure. Oh God, what did I get myself into? That's an automatic thought that comes into your head. What a lot of people don't realize is you can choose to allow that in. Your head should be like a fucking nightclub. You shouldn't be letting everybody in. It should be exclusive, right? You should go, you know what? Negative thoughts need to like fucking get, carded a lot harder. Is this actually a negative thought? Is this something I should be thinking? Is it reasonable, right? And then, your behaviors and your emotions come into play as well. But where we can start to affect ourselves is if there's a problem in any one of these areas, you can actually fix it by tools in the other ones as well if you can't in that area. For instance, sometimes thoughts start to be running so rampant that it takes a behavior, something like going for a walk or doing something relaxing, to calm the body down first before you can start working through those thoughts, right? So that's good to know that tools in each area can affect each area. So I'll teach you a few tools. I'm going to put forth some knowledge about tools, and all this stuff, it's accessible in the book that you'll have there, the beginner tools, but if you want more and a more in-depth explanation of it, in this book there's a QR code, and it takes you through a bunch of online lectures that I've made that'll teach you it even more in depth. So thoughts, they call it like the workhorse of cognitive behavior therapy. And the tool that was most useful here is called the thought record. In this form, I've done a short form thought record. It's called ABCD, and it kind of just takes you through your activating event, what made that thought come up, your beliefs about that event, all the things that I believe are happening right now because of this event, and then the consequences of holding on to those beliefs. If I keep thinking like this, what actually will happen? Right? If I keep thinking negatively, what's going to happen to me? And then D is the dispute of all those negative thoughts. So if I dispute them, is this actually true, right? Thought records get more in depth than that. There's a 7-column one where you kind of learn to just remove the emotion from the event. So instead of, I fucking tried to hit this ball, but I'm a fucking piece of shit and I don't know how to golf and it sucks. You go, I'm trying something new and I missed it on the first try because it's brand new. There's a lot of emotion removed from that. And a lot of our problems come from emotional clouding with events, right? My big one, and I talk about it all the time, is traffic, right? I don't know how traffic is in Saskatchewan, but if it's as bad as it is in Alberta, somebody cuts me off and I'm like, oh my God, this motherfucker tried to kill me. What am I doing? And that's an emotional reaction. That's an emotional thought. No one's trying to kill me, right? Someone didn't see me, or, I'm driving too fast and they thought they had more time and they pulled out. And in turn, it was a near miss, as safety would call it, and everybody's fine, right? So understanding how to remove that emotion is the first part. Then you go into rating your emotion, how emotional you got through that, and looking at the unhelpful images that came up, like what am I thinking? This guy is trying to kill me, blah, blah, blah. And you weigh it in the positive and negative then. Is this actually true? Was this guy trying to kill me? Or, what is true about this? Okay, well, he just pulled out in front of me and I might have been driving a little fast or whatever. Then you re-rate your emotion. And what you find most of the time is that you've calmed down. For a guy who is going through a divorce with all the fucking shit going through my head when I was up in a lunchroom, having this tool where I could literally go and write down my thoughts and work through them every lunch hour, I had a stack like this big. And eventually when I started looking through them, I'm like, it's the same fucking thought. But I'm like, at least it's here. Because I was up in Fort Mac, literally dangling from a crane, a mobile crane, in a basket, inspecting their tank farm fire protection system under gas, that whole summer while I'm going through a divorce. And I thought, if I was worried about all this shit while I'm doing this safety critical thing, what could have happened, right? We could have hit the side of the tank. I could have fucking pinched my fingers against that. I could have been standing on my air tubes. There's a lot of shit that could have went wrong, right? And thought records really helped me with that. It's really important to be able to work through your thoughts. That being said, I developed a program, and one of the examples we use is there's a guy about to go into an EWP. He's been fighting with his wife all night, and in the morning he feels kind of remorseful about it, so he texts her, I'm sorry, babe, we had that fight, we'll talk about it later. I love you lots. And she just gives him one letter back. She just says, K. And his mind starts spiraling. Oh, fuck, I fucked up. She's still mad at me. I'm getting a divorce. Oh my God, this is going to go so bad. He's in full fall arrest, about to step into EWP and go work welding on a side of a tank. He's not going to stop the job and go do a thought record. So what does he do? Well, there's all these things in thoughts called cognitive distortions. And we learn to kind of understand that through emotional clouding, a lot of times we can't see the world as it is. We try to put a lot of implications on things like the letter K when someone texts us. So instead of going, oh, maybe her arms are like, she's full of groceries, or she's dealing with the kids and it was just a quick thing, or maybe she's driving right now and she just went K, but I'm already thinking that it's about me. He's personalizing it, which is a cognitive distortion. You're making it about you. He's also jumping to conclusions, another cognitive distortion. This book is full of them, and if you read up on them and get kind of knowledgeable about them, you start filtering out a lot of negative shit in your life that you're just assuming is happening, right? And it's a super helpful tool that you can use just on the fly to go, I'm not thinking about that, and kick those automatic thoughts out of your fucking nightclub head. Next, we'll just go to behaviors. And this one was so good that it pulled me out of a negative cycle of behavior where I was pretty much about to go and put myself in AA. And while I was dealing with all this shit, I was up north in Fort Mac hitting the Boston Pizza in our parking lot every weekend, just getting tanked, like just getting ridiculous tanked. I think I even spiked the debit machine. I was so tanked one night, and the girls were like, "That's all good, no worries." Either way. My behaviors, what it does is it takes you through your day hour by hour. So when you start tracking yourself like a scientist, a couple of things happen immediately. You start acting better. Like when you're going hour for hour and being accountable of how much sleep you get, how much water you drink, the type of food you eat, you immediately start being better for yourself. You start being more healthy, right? So I've got an example in this book that you'll see where it shows my average kind of schedule where I'm eating pizza all the time and kind of treating my body like shit. And then the second day, okay, I start eating chicken, start making smoothies, I start stretching in the morning before work, and then I'm waking up earlier and I'm going to bed earlier, and I start hitting the gym. And then all of a sudden Friday comes around, and I'm rating these days 1 out of 10 every day to kind of keep track of them, which ones are the good days, which ones are the bad days. So by the time Friday comes around, I've went from a 2-day where I'm depressed and dealing with shit to a 10-day, and I'm like, Friday comes, it's an 11-day. Like, let's go to the bar, let's party, I'm having so much fun. Saturday comes around, I'm back to a 2-day, and I'm like, what the fuck? And when you're in the fucking forest, you can't see the trees for the forest. You don't know. You go, well, I'm just partying with the boys. It's a good time. It's all good. I'm dealing with divorces. This is what you do when you deal with a divorce. You get out there, you do your thing. And I'm not here to preach about drinking, whatever. It's not a big deal if you're doing it 1 week out of the month or whatever. But once you see it's affecting your life because you're being a weekend warrior for an entire year, you can literally see it when you have that data in front of you, right? I'm having 9 days and everything's up so good. I'm getting healthy, and then boom, it spiked down. And then, okay, I have to work myself up every week, and then boom, it spiked down. And you go, what's killing all my progress of keeping my happiness? And when you have that data in front of you, it's pretty hard to be like, oh, well, it's okay if I still go drinking. You see what's fucking you up. And the next step is so simple that it's why it gets missed. And I have 5 pages dedicated to this book. You just take out the shitty behavior that's fucking up your life and you put in a better one. And I couldn't think of anything better to do in Fort McMurray than go drinking with my friends and people who weren't my friends and spend money on everybody in the bar until I really started thinking about it. And that's why there's 5 pages dedicated to it of just a lists of better shit to do than go out and get pissed drunk, right? And make it so all of your happy chemicals just get depleted in one night. And, again, it's not a big thing if you're doing this every once in a while, but when you're doing it and it's robbing you of all your happiness, you're kind of faced with the decision at that point. Do I want to keep being unhappy? Do I want to keep fucking up my life and kind of doing this? Or do I want to make a positive change that'll last for a long time? And that's some tools that you can use for behaviors. There's actually a whack of them, but these are kind of the introductory ones. Next, we move into emotions. And emotions is a hard one. A lot of trades workers and people just don't really understand their emotions so much, right? And this really came to head for me after I wrote this book. I had a friend of mine who was on Facebook who bought about 4 or 5 copies. She's a psychologist, and she gives them to people who are in her practice and clients of hers who have come to see her. And she told me this story one day. She's like, man, your book really helped one of my clients. And I was like, oh, really? Like, what happened? And she said, this guy would come into my office and he'd be like, he's going through all this stuff and he'd be like, this is how I feel. And he'd just whip out his phone, he'd go on Spotify and he'd play Linkin Park Bleed. And he'd be like, that's it. That's my feeling. She'd be like, well, what feeling is that? And he's like, you tell me, I'm paying you all this money. What feeling is that? And she goes, well, you have to tell me how you're feeling. I can't tell you how you feel about a song. And she goes, well, maybe check this out. And in here, there's a little wheel called the feelings wheel. And it shows you what kind of emotions are, seen on the outskirts as being very nuanced, and how they kind of go into bigger, more broad emotions, and then eventually land into emotions like fear, sadness, anger, joy, surprise. The thing that pissed me off is no 2 feelings wheels are the same. But once I learned that emotions are pretty fluid, it made a lot of sense. But there's interesting shit in there. Like, one thing I didn't really understand is that jealousy can come from a place of anger and from fear, right? You can be fearful that, you're not going to have enough as much as other people. And when you explore these emotions, you kind of become a little bit more in touch with yourself and you can work through it. Cognitive behavior therapy uses the words, name it to tame it. So now that you understand how to name it, she gave this book to this guy, and the next time he came back, he's like, oh yeah, bleed makes me, it gets me hyped up, makes me feel angry. It brings up, feelings of insecurity about all this other stuff, and just, I feel jaded, and I just want to say fuck it to the world. That's kind of how I feel, right? So she was able to help him work through some of those emotions after he was able to discover them, right? So now that he's named it, how do you tame those kind of emotions? Well, there's a lot of really awesome techniques, but there's a big thing to understand first is what causes a huge emotional reaction and causes us to have these outbursts where we might do something that we don't really think like that was appropriate in the moment, right? What causes us to write the angry emails or the bad text messages to people we're in relationships with that get us in shit because it was over emotional and over reactionary. And a lot of it is our nervous system, right? There's parts of our nervous system that are left over from our ancestors who literally had to make risk assessments at all times. If they were out in the jungle and they were out, in the forest and there was a bear out there, they had to go, shit, there's a threat to my life right in front of me. And your body is trained to make a split-second decision, because if it wasn't, you died, right? So everybody who survived was left over, and they left us with this kind of reaction, which is called fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. Your nervous system creates these immediate survival reactions, which either you're going to fight the bear, you're going to go, oh shit, and freeze, which might work. The fighting definitely won't work. You're going to, flee, which you run, and bears can run pretty fucking fast, so unless you can run fast, you're not going to make it. Or fawn, which is, you curl up into a little ball and just go, if I die, I die. And strangely enough, that one is the one to do. That one works, I guess. That's what they train you. Well, in Fort Mac, they just gave us a bunch of bear spray and said, if a bear comes, fucking put it in his head and run the other way, I guess, right? Get into the truck. But when that reaction happens, you have a way of actually doing a body hack that kicks it out the other direction, right? And this is used so frequently in emergency responders and military personnel that right before a fireman will go into a burning building, they are trained with this breathing exercise to get in there to do it so that they can think critically about saving lives without having an emotional reaction of fear. So they don't stop right before the door and go, my body won't fucking move, right? Because they have trained their bodies to kick this shit out of their head. Same thing with military guys. Bullets are flying everywhere. They're about to go into training exercise. So they go, I might not live through this. How do they get there? How do they hack their bodies in order to do this crazy shit? It's called box breathing. And it's super simple, but how it works is really cool. The way our mind is kind of understood by modern psychology is that our mind is like a workbench. We can pull things from our memory, and that's like going to the back of our inventory and going, cool, I'm grabbing this and putting it on the workbench, and I'm going to work with it because that's my memories of how things happen, right? And when we're dealing with anger and we're dealing with all this other stuff, our workbench is so fucking crowded that this is all we can see. This is all we can deal with, is this huge, angry thought. It's like someone just plopping their lunch on your workbench, and you want to do shit, but there's this lunch here. You're not going to, there's a big bowl of soup on your workbench. You can't do anything else. The first thing is get rid of the soup. And this is a way to do it by understanding this visualization exercise where you visualize a box and the movement around the box while counting and breathing. The visualization and counting literally clears your bench. So for a second, whatever the fuck is bugging you is gone. Your bench is clear. This is all you get, right? And that kind of relief really helps. And then paired with the breathing exercise, it soothes your nervous system. And that causes you to lower your emotional reaction. And literally, your body starts releasing better chemicals, your blood pressure goes down, a bunch of body reactions happen. That's how the hack works. So I'm going to teach you your first tool today, but there's a bunch more tools in here that you can learn. And this is so simple that I like to say if you can draw a box and count to 4 and breathe, you can do this, right? So you can calm yourselves down. I think everybody here is covered, right? No iron workers, we're good? Everybody can count to 4? Couple iron workers? Oh shit, no. I'm just bugging. I love iron workers. Anyways, so what we'll do is you can keep your eyes open, and you can do this because I do it in traffic all the time if someone cuts me off. Or you can you close your eyes and do it as well. But we'll just start with just a big breathe in, and then exhale. And the first time we do it, I'll say everything. The second time we do it, I'll give you less instruction. The third time I do it, I'll give you no instruction. So we'll just breathe in and out one more time. Okay, we'll breathe in and come up the side of the box. Breathe in and go up. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold and go across. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale and go down. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold and across. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now inhale and up. Hold and across. Exhale and down. Hold and across. And this works so well, that it calms me down. It literally, I love doing it when I do these talks because you see me up here, I'm full of coffee, I'm fucking moving my arms around like crazy. When I do this, it calms me down like mid-talk. But the first time I used this, I was outside of a boot room in Fort Mac yelling at a lawyer. I literally, all the hormones in my body and the chemical levels of just spiking. I'm going high stress mode, walking a ditch in front of this boot room being like, she's not going to take my kid from me. She's not going to take my house from me, blah, blah, blah. And it felt like I was about to have a heart attack. So I said, you know what? Let me calm down. Let me try that thing that I learned. So I tried to do it and I was like, I don't know if that fucking worked. Like, what the fuck? But I was making the same mistake that the golfer thought would make, right? This is the first time I'm using this, and I expected to just go off, and be on like Donkey Kong. It's not going to happen, right? And an analogy I use to explain it is these are tools, right? When my son watches me, build stuff from IKEA or whatever at home, he wants to jump right in there with me. He's like, this is fun, we're building stuff. So he'll grab those little crappy screwdrivers they get, and he's going to try to assemble stuff, but he can't understand why the screws aren't going in so well. It's his first time doing it. He doesn't have the muscle memory. He doesn't understand how much pressure to put on. These are tools just like anybody else, any tool. And when you use them more, you become more familiar with them. You understand the feeling you're getting from it. You lean into them more and become familiar with how they work, and they work better. So if some of these tools don't work for you at first, try them a couple more times and just see what does work, right? The whole explanation of this book is I just lay out a bunch of tools in front of you. See what works, see what doesn't, see what affects your life, see what you might adopt, right? Guarantee you're probably using some of this shit anyways already. So that being said, I wrote this book. It was actually started in my basement. I wrote a little book, and it ended up on the president of the Edmonton Construction Association's desk. And what happened was he was like, why isn't this on Amazon? So I put it on Amazon, and he hired me to do a talk. And then what happened was my uncle ended up going through a depressive episode where he, had a really hard time. And my aunt had asked me, I got this book for him, but I don't know if he'll actually, read it because he doesn't read. And all this flashback came back of me in the oil sands reading through all the Dune series, and every guy who walked up hitting my book being like, oh, what are you fucking reading? And I'm like, did I just write a book for a bunch of dudes who don't fucking read? I'm like, how the hell do I get to these guys, right? So like I said in the beginning, there's a QR code in the front here. If you don't want to read the book, that's fine. You can go straight to this, use this QR code. It takes you right to this YouTube site. And there are 7 lecture series that'll literally read the book to you, teach you all about cognitive behavior therapy, and this just becomes a workbook, right? There's lots of stuff in here that you need to write in that helps you track your days and prompts you can answer. and even some thought records that you can do. So all this will teach you that. And then I thought, if if nobody buys the book and nobody goes to the site, how do I get this stuff to people, right? How do I present it to their companies to help them buy in? And I thought, how did I learn on site, right? It was through safety things. Like, this is a safety issue. Mental health is a safety issue. So I said, but there's no safety courses that teach this shit. So I designed one, and it's about a 4-hour course, and it's called Mental Health Skills in the Trades, right? And this course has been adopted by Edmonton Construction Association and Alberta Construction Training Institute, and it's taught out of both of those. It's being actually converted into an LMS program right now that will be both in French and English. And actually, during next week, I'm presenting it to a board of electricians to see that it can come into electrician training when people are coming up through the trade. So this is some of the first stuff they learn before they get into the trade and get head fucked. They can learn some stuff to prevent it. But either way, that's my story, and it's been a pleasure talking to you guys. You guys will have the book. Take a look through it. I made it, big writing, lots of pictures, super thin. It's not supposed to be an intimidating read. It's supposed to be super accessible. Lots of jokes about how not to punch out your boss and, how life kind of shits on you and how to deal with it. But I hope you guys enjoy it, and thank you so much for letting me talk to you. Thank you. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask them. I stick around for a little bit, and if you need, I'll be here for a little while, so you can hit me in the hall too if you want to talk about something privately. But yeah.
I have an interesting anecdote.
Okay.
About incidents and your mental state. So in my previous role in a Kristian, done safety for probably 15 years now, 14.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe investigated something on the order of 700 incidents, from minor finger pinches to guys losing their toes. Maybe 3 of those 700, because I almost always ask the question, like, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Anything bothering you? Especially for the big stuff, right? The high profile stuff. Driver spills a load of steel across the yard because he didn't have any straps on. You ask them how they're doing, how they're feeling, like, is there anything going on? Are you distracted? Are you stressed? Whatever. Nobody says a damn thing. I've maybe had 3 out of 700 people tell me something. Yeah, my wife's bugging me. Yeah, we're broke.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, right? Everybody's going through something always, but nobody will talk about it with the safety guy.
And it's
when they've just had an incident.
It's a big part of it. They say, complacency is one of the bigger things, but there's something we talk about in the mental health sphere, which is not absenteeism. Like, people think, oh, if I got mental health problems, I'm going to get drunk and not come into work. Absenteeism is how you spot it. But presenteeism is a big part too, right? Somebody who shows up to work and they're like, whatever, my head is somewhere else. I'm going to give it like 30% today and just keep going. And like, they're not there. They're not totally there. And that becomes that safety hazard, right? And when you're complacent and you're skipping procedures because your mind's elsewhere, how do you mitigate that? You can put it on an FLHA and say, stay like complacency, but what do you do that removes that hazard? There's nothing that people understand, right? If complacency comes from because your mind is somewhere else, like I said, the thought records literally helped me, right? I was able to go in, and work on my problems on my own time, and be like, hey, this is what the issue is. But I know that's not the actual fucking issue because this problem I'm worrying about I'm not seeing it correctly. And I was able to come back. It kept popping up and I had to keep coming back to it. But by rewiring my brain to know, okay, these are automatic thoughts that are popping into my head and I can choose to think them or not, it helped me keep on task and stay safe during all that shit, right? So that's why I know it's a safety issue, because you see it all the time, right? There's guys who skip procedures and they fucking miss fingers. And I don't think anybody out there deserves to have a leg severed or a fatality on site. Sorry, I said the word, but, because they were just thinking about, their safety, security, and happiness in life, right? That's not a cool payoff. I'm trying to work to, sustain my life, and I'm worried about my life, and that work has now ended my life or, made my life shittier through injury, right? I work with a lot of guys who, cognitive behavior therapy also works for chronic pain. And so I work with a lot of guys training them in how to deal with chronic pain. And a lot of these dudes from the trades, I do it pro bono because they're, excommunicated from a million different associations because they got injured, including WCB. No one's helping them, and they just don't even know how to manage their own lives. So CBT really helps them, But either way, it's one of those things that you can help to manage your life a lot. So I hope you guys adopt some of the tools. And if not, now you know it exists. So therapy and mental health and all these other kind of things, there's different modalities. You don't have to go talk to a therapist. You don't have to tell everybody your problems. You can keep that privacy if it's important to you, right? These things you can do on your own, by yourself. Nobody has to know what the heck you're going through, but you have a way to work through it, right? Cool. Well, thanks, guys. It's awesome being out here, so.